This is the 17th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's audio magazine podcast. Ear to the Ground features interviews, reviews, and field reports related to sustainable agriculture, family farming, local food systems, and local democracy. I'm your host, Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Ear to the Ground periodically provides a peek into one of the most successful beginning farmer programs in the country. During the past 9 years, the Land Stewardship Project's Farm Beginnings program has provided participants from throughout the upper Midwest an opportunity to learn firsthand about low-cost, sustainable methods of farming. In this installment, we will feature an excerpt of a Farm Beginnings class presentation given by farmer Chris Blanchard. Chris, along with his wife Kim, operates a community-supported agriculture farm in southeast Minnesota. Rock Spring Farm sells shares to consumers before each growing season. In return for that purchased share, the farmer's consumer members receive a delivery of fresh, organic produce during the summer and early fall. Over the years, Chris and Kim have gained a reputation for not only producing top-quality, organic produce, but for managing their operation in a fiscally sound manner. Chris is a regular Farm Beginnings presenter, and his classes on financial planning are a favorite of many class participants. In a previous podcast, Chris talked about the nuts and bolts of financial planning. Here, he discusses the importance of planning for profit when considering various agricultural enterprises. One of the planning tools the Blanchards rely on heavily is gross profit analysis.
Okay, gross profit analysis is a clear and simple way to determine which enterprises are likely to contribute the most to overhead expenses and therefore to profit. Every farm has a certain amount of overhead. You know, you've got insurance, you've got the cost of ownership of your land. In our case, that's paying for a mortgage. You've got the cost of upkeep for the farmers. You need new overalls and new boots every now and then. Taxes, all those kinds of things are really overhead expenses. What we need is a way to figure out how to cover what contributes the most to those overhead expenses, and then and therefore once those overhead expenses are covered, then to profit. Profit's an overhead expense too. I mean, it's not like you get to spend $1 from sheep differently than you get to spend $1 from vegetables. It's all still $1. In traditional profit analysis, you're going to use a system to allocate that overhead. So you'd look at an enterprise and you'd say, well, you know, on our farm, we might say, well, vegetables account for 90% of the dollars made on our farm. Therefore, we're going to allocate 90% of the overhead expenses to the vegetable enterprise and see if it still makes money. But Alan Savory and the holistic management folks take a slightly different perspective, and they look. So the white on here is income, the light shade is direct costs, and the overhead is fixed costs. They encourage you not to allocate the overhead to the enterprises. So what this means is that your only expenses you're going to consider when you're comparing two enterprises. If you're trying to decide, hey, do I want to raise chickens or do I want to raise sheep? One way to do that is to perform a gross profit analysis and look and say, okay, for enterprise A, chickens, we're going to make $20,000 selling chickens. I'm going to sell 2,000 chickens for $10 each, so I'm going to make $20,000. And those chickens, my expenses are what? You got chicks, you got feed. That's really it. And some equipment. Here, you got $11,000 worth of feed and equipment and chicks. Okay, so my gross profit on that, I don't really care. Land price, I'm not going to consider that in this because it's not a direct cost associated with chickens. I own the land. I'm going to pay the mortgage whether I get a job in town, raise sheep, or raise chickens. Okay, got $9,000 of gross profit. In enterprise B, I'm going to raise sheep. I'm going to raise, we're going to make $16,000 off of the sheep because I'm going to raise 160 sheep and sell them each for $100. And then, but it only sheep are cheaper. I've got my associated costs with sheep. Hey, say I already own the land or own the sheep, so my real costs are really just for feed, right? Because I've already got the sheep. I've got the sheep, so therefore I breed the sheep and I get the lambs. That doesn't cost me anything. I've got an expense for bedding in the barn and hay to feed and fencing in the field and labor. And so that's only going to cost me $5,000. So I've got $11,000 worth of gross profit off of sheep. Which would I rather do? Well, probably I want to raise sheep because then I'm going to have $11,000 that I get to put into covering the overhead, to pay the mortgage on the farm, to pay the taxes, to buy a new pair of overalls. And so instead of looking, you guys all hear me say, we raised $250,000 worth of vegetables last year. And everybody goes, hooray! Well, that's nothing to cheer about. Okay? Because I might have spent $260,000 to raise $250,000 worth of vegetables. You guys don't know that unless I tell you. And so these are really the numbers that count, is profit. Profit is what this is all about. Remember, it's like blood for the body. It's not the point of life, but without profit, there is no life for the business or for the farm. So that's, really, this is it for gross profit analysis. This is one of the most powerful tools that you can apply to making decisions on the farm. Where do I get the most bang for my buck?
I suppose, where you're at, you probably mix them. Like you might say, have a chart like that for vegetables, but then you'd say, my leftover vegetables would provide so much food for the chickens or so much food for the sheep, and it would do so much better for the chickens that it would change it. Because they're interrelated, right?
Yeah.
Or not.
You got to be careful with that. You can spend a lot of time trying to play with that. You can have an enterprise of hay and then an enterprise of beef. Well, technically, if you have an enterprise of hay, you should know approximately how much does it cost per bale, and you should charge that amount to the beef enterprise. And then if you turn around and sell some of the other hay, you should. You can certainly shift money from one account to another. Of course, with something like feeding cabbage to the chickens, you want to be careful when you start doing that. And it's like saying that raising an extra ton of turnips makes a lot of sense because I can feed them to the pigs. I don't know. That's mostly a bunch of water, The pigs like them. I think it makes the meat taste better, but that's about it. It's not like you're making money off of raising turnips and selling them to the pigs. If I had to pay retail prices for those turnips to feed them to the pigs, boy, we'd be losing money on our pigs hand over fist. So you want to be careful with that. But some things are going to be mixed, and you shouldn't be afraid to. Don't be afraid to crunch the numbers. That's the thing.
If you buy a new hoop house for your vegetable operation, where do you put it, in fixed or direct cost?
Okay, overhead, fixed costs. Let's talk about fixed costs. To determine what a fixed cost is, you look at this point in time. All the water that's gone, if I'm standing on a bridge, right, and under me is running the river of time, everything that's downstream from me is water under the bridge. It's too late now. That's a fixed cost. I'm already committed to paying the insurance on the farm. My overall liability insurance, I got to do that whether I like it or not. I got to pay taxes on the farm. I got to pay mortgage on the farm. That's all water under the bridge. That hoop house is upstream from me still. I haven't bought it yet. So that's a variable expense. Okay? So this is different than traditional bookkeeping. I want to look out and say, these are direct, that hoop house is going to be a direct cost to the enterprise. If I already own the hoop house, all right, it's downstream from me now. I've already spent the money. It's already bought and paid for. Well, now that, am I choosing, do I want to this year raise sun gold cherry tomatoes in the greenhouse? Or do I want to graze sheep on pasture? I've only got time to do one or the other. Well, then there's no extra expense for that greenhouse. It's already there. I already own it. So it's not in overhead. Or it is in overhead. The greenhouse then is in overhead because I already got it. It doesn't go into this $11,000 that it's going to cost me to raise chickens. Because I already have it, or $11,000 to raise sun gold cherry tomatoes. I've already owned that thing. The fixed or the direct costs are really what it's going to cost me this year to do this thing. Now, with something like a hoop house, we build greenhouses that cost in the neighborhood of $12,000. Well, they're going to last for 20 years. So I don't want to have to afford all of that this first year. That's where you might want to do a return on investment. Figure out your years to pay back and plug some of that stuff in when you're making these choices. Or how long is that piece of equipment going to last? You buy a delivery truck. Is it a 2-year delivery truck or a 10-year delivery truck?
How would you, using this model, how would you figure out if it's cheap, if you want omega eggs, so eggs that were laid by chickens who ate flax, how would you know if it was cheaper to raise your own flax or to buy flax?
Okay, so how would you know if it was a better decision to raise flax or buy flax to sell high omega eggs? So I guess what I would do is I'd figure out, well, how much do my chicks cost? What are all the direct costs that go into a given enterprise? And then if you want to decide whether you need to raise flax or buy flax, you figure out, well, what are the direct costs associated with raising flax? Well, you're going to need a seed drill. You're going to need acres of land to do that on. You're going to need labor to do it. You're going to get so much flax per unit of dollar input. You're going to need a way to get it harvested. All those things come with costs. So you're going to have a neighbor custom combine it. How much is that going to cost to do? Figure all that stuff in. Well, that's all costs that then you would associate. If the only reason you were raising flax is to feed in the high omega eggs, then those are all costs that are only associated with the high omega egg production and the production of flax for that. And then you could compare that to going down to Tom Francis feed bill and buying organic flax and seeing, how would that compare? Because those are both direct costs, and you're still going to get the same amount of eggs. So actually, the top line on both of those will be the same. It's just a matter of which is going to come out with less direct costs. Now, if you already own the flax combine, okay, or maybe you already own a bunch of flax seed, those are then overhead, and you're not going to allocate those. Okay, for example, I actually happen to have, because we got behind on our cover crop planting, 3,000 pounds of rye seed in my barn, right? That's overhead now. I can plant 3,000 pounds of rye seed next year for essentially no cost to myself except for the operational cost of the tractor. Okay, but because I already own the seed, right? So that's water under the bridge. I don't have to go out and buy. So if I'm trying to decide, do I want to plant rye or do I want to plant oats? Okay, I would look and say, well, gee, maybe I'm going to make, $20,000 from planting oats, but it's going to cost me $11,000 because I got to spend $6,000 on oat seed. Okay, but over here in column B, I've got rye, and the rye, I already own the oat seed that's down here in the allocations overhead. It's only going to cost me $5,000 worth of diesel fuel and combine costs to get those to grow the rye. So I'm going to make more money growing rye, even though the price of rye is lower, because I already bought the seed. Okay.
I've been very interested in omega eggs, and I have been feeding flaxseed to my chickens. And it started with the gal at the University of Nebraska, and my brother-in-law teaches there, and Canadian Flaxseed Council. And so I had my eggs tested at the Ori Lab. And about a month ago, 2 months ago, Mother Earth News had an article on eggs. And it seems, and I know when Artemis Simopoulos, the Mediterranean diet gal that was at the National Health, anyway, the one who came up, when she came with omega eggs, when she brought eggs from her dad's place in Crete, and had them tested, it seems, and I want to follow this up, but it seems if you've got range-fed chickens, you may have all the omega-3 you need, and you don't have to spend the money for flax. And they've got Mother Earth News has Mother Earth News /eggs, and there's going to be a lot of, I don't know, I'm hoping that there's going to be some interesting information there. So it may be that if you want, I know that the gal who did the experiments at the University of Nebraska was doing. She sold her formula to people who have thousands of chickens, and it may be if you've got them all cooped up, the only way you're going to get omega-3 eggs is by feeding them flax. But it may be those of us who range feed already have omega-3 in our eggs. So.
So this is, and the other thing to think about here that may be related to the difference between raising chickens on pasture, which doesn't necessarily get you as many eggs as force feeding chickens in a cage and pushing flax meal through them. Not that that's what you had in mind, but you might get more money in eggs, again, over here in column A, by force feeding those chickens, right? But maybe if you put them out on pasture, you're going to get a lower yield, but your costs are going to be so much lower because they're going to eat so much more of their feed right out there and scrounge it themselves.
And the price can be higher, right? Because people want to buy more omega eggs.
Hey, so now your income's coming up again. Yeah. These are the kinds of things you want to be playing with. And again, the example there would be if you got to build a building to house your caged chickens in so that you can force feed them this flaxseed stuff, right? Then, those are all, building that building is a direct cost. It's in this gray column here. But if you put them out on pasture that you already own, that the only thing you're doing right now is going out and mowing it twice a year to keep the thistles down, and now you're going to raise chickens on it, well, you don't put a cost for the pasture in here unless it actually costs you money to put the chickens on pasture. If you have to rent the pasture from your neighbor, well, then you better put that in your direct cost. But if you already own the pasture and it's just sitting there not doing anything for you, or you've run cows over it and now you're going to run chickens over it right after the cows, but it's not actually costing you anything to do that, then you don't put it. It belongs down here in this fixed costs of of all of your enterprises. Okay? So an example of this is last year we had this is in 2004. We had a bumper crop of roots on our farm. Everything just went so right with how many roots we planted, and it became quickly obvious that there was no way we were going to store these in the limited amount of walk-in space that we had on our farm. Now, I could have looked at that and said, well, it's going to cost me, I've got this much money into growing the beets. We got the seed cost, we got the land cost, we paid to hoe those beets twice, we cultivated them with the tractor. But when we were deciding what we were going to do with this huge bumper crop, we didn't look at all that. We said all of that is downstream from us now. The only thing that we have to decide now is whether we can make money picking those beets, renting some storage, and storing them in that storage unit, and then having the post-harvest handling costs. I didn't need at that point to look at seed cost, hoeing cost, cultivating cost, land cost. All of that was water under the bridge. I'd already done all those things. We said, we have a bumper crop of beets. I can rent a semi-trailer from La Crosse Transport Refrigeration, and I can do that for $600 a month for 3 months is $1,800, and I can put in there how many tons of beets and carrots and turnips, and I can sell those things, and it all made an abundance of sense, and I never even had to consider how much those turnips cost me to actually get them to that point. All I had to think about was how fast can I get those things picked, how long is it going to take to wash them, and how much is that trailer going to cost me to rent to store them in. That's it, because that was all that was left upstream in the production process. So when we did our analysis on that, we did a quick gross profit analysis. Well, the best place for us to spend our money last September was to spend it on renting that trailer and getting those root crops out of the ground and into that storage trailer. Now, the important thing here is now, we do all that. This is not a pricing tool. This is a decision-making tool. When you're doing your pricing, you'd better cover your overhead and your profit in your pricing. When I decide how much to charge for those roots, at that point, I'm not going to say, well, gee, I only need to charge 30 cents a pound for my beets because that's all it costs me to pick them and store them and wash them. No, it costs me $1 a pound because then I want to go back and include the seed cost, the cultivating cost, the hoeing costs, the land cost, the overhead, and my profit. I want to get all of that in when I'm considering price. So this isn't a pricing tool. This is an enterprise evaluation tool or a decision-making tool for deciding whether something makes economic sense. At this point in time, this year, when we sat down to decide, are we going to rent a semi-trailer to store roots in for 2005, when we were making that decision back in December of 2004, we then looked at that and said, well, the cost of growing those roots is going to be X. Because the choice at that point was, do I grow the root crops or do I not grow the root crops? Okay. Last September of 2004, the choice was, do I pick the root crops and put them into storage, or do I leave them out in the field? Those were my two choices at that point. So at different points in time. So this is also a tool at a fixed point in time is when you use this. If I haven't bought the greenhouse, it's upstream. If I've already owned the greenhouse, it's downstream. Okay.
If you're still depreciating it, you do it over. It's still a cost. It's not a fixed cost till after it's already paid for, is it?
If I've already got it, look. No, this isn't accounting. We're not accounting. We're making decisions about what to do on our farm to make the most money that we possibly can with the resources that we have at hand. Now, I've got a greenhouse, all right, and I've bought the greenhouse. I'm already committed. It doesn't matter. I'm going to pay the loan on that structure, whether I use the structure or I don't use the structure, okay? I have $3,000 a year that I'm paying in a loan for a greenhouse. That's a fixed cost. Debt service. Done deal. I can't get out of it. I mean, what's my other choice? I could sell the greenhouse. Okay, that would be something to look at. From an accounting perspective, you're right. From a gross profit analysis perspective, that greenhouse is downstream. I'm already committed to paying the money for it. My only question now is whether I'm going to grow tomatoes in the greenhouse or I'm going to grow winter squash outside. That's it. Which of those things am I going to do given my limited time and other resource money for buying seeds or labor or whatever?
So it's a fixed cost even the first year you buy it.
Once you bought it.
Right.
The day you buy that greenhouse, you're committed to the greenhouse. Now it's a fixed, it's part of your, don't think of it as fixed, it's overhead. Now it's overhead. You bought it, it's overhead. You can't get out of it.
Yeah.
Okay? But if you haven't bought it yet, it's still in this variable part here. It's above this black ocean down here. One of the tricks that a lot of people advocate in the financial planning side is to minimize your overhead expenses. Okay? Because direct costs, you can change those over time, right? You get in a tight spot, you can change your direct costs, but you can't change those fixed costs. We've used this on things like doing deliveries as well as another spot where we did this. When we started this, when we were deciding whether we wanted to sell wholesale vegetables up in the Twin Cities, we already had a CSA up there. We were already driving up there for the CSA. The wholesale vegetables at that point, when I'm deciding, do I want to take on another wholesale account up in the Twin Cities? It takes me a half an hour to deliver to a wholesale account. It takes me 6 hours to drive to the cities and back home again. Okay? But I'm already doing that. That's a fixed overhead cost. I'm already going to do that whether I sell to another food co-op or not. So selling to another food co-op, I don't need to take in the cost of getting to the Twin Cities. The only two choices are, do I sell to the food co-op or do I not sell to the food co-op? So, and if I sell to the food co-op, I have a half an hour of delivery time and maybe another 20 miles of driving expense. I don't have this whole other expense of getting up to the Twin Cities because I'm already there. So that's water under the bridge. You always want to make sure when you're doing your enterprise planning and the gross profit analysis exercises to assess the risk. Okay, I didn't think of a good example of this, so I'm going to wing it here. If this is if section B here is what you could make growing marijuana on your farm, and this is what you could make growing corn, you might go, hey, I should grow marijuana. Okay, but that has risk involved. Okay, you don't use this tool. This is actually a very dangerous tool used in isolation. Okay, hey, look, I could make all of this money if I were to plow up right up to the creek side and plant corn and spray it with Roundup. All right? And, well, you know, if I do that whole organic thing, I'm only going to make this much money. And if I keep those buffer strips in place and, you know, well, if I use this tool in isolation, it might say, hey, you know, I should be plowing right up to the creek side. I should be planting Roundup Ready soybeans. Okay? But with the rest of my goals, that doesn't pass. This is one tool, again, in that holistic management chart. This is one of your decision-making tools. It's not the only decision-making tool. You never do your financial planning in isolation, ever.
Farm Beginnings is currently taking applicants for its next series of classes, which convene each fall and last through the winter. Following the classes, participants can take part in a series of on-farm visits during the spring and summer. For more information, see www.farmbeginnings.org. That's www.farmbeginnings.org. For more on the Blanchards and Rock Spring Farm, visit www.rsfarm.com. That's www.rsfarm.com. Send your comments, criticisms, and suggestions about this podcast to me, Brian DeVore, at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org. You can also call me at 612-729-6294. Special thank you goes out to Laura Borgendale, a Western Minnesota musician and LSP staffer who provided Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a very special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member and would like to support us, go to landstewardshipproject.org to learn how to join LSP. Thanks for listening.